We left off last video getting our grid in place as you see here. I left you with the challenge to build the UI of the detail view, and that's what we're gonna do in this video. So if you struggle with that challenge, don't worry, we're still early, we're still getting started, we got plenty of practice to go. If you did complete the challenge, now's where we can kind of compare code and compare methods and see how it went. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna do, this is gonna be a separate file. So click on our Apple Frameworks folder, Command N, new file, new SwiftUI file, hit next. We're gonna call this framework detail view. Create. Cool, it's blank. Let's get our preview up and running nicely. There we go. Hello world. Cool. So again, pulling up the design, let's talk about the overall structure, right? So we have our framework title view, like the VStack we've already created, right? Remember we said we were going to reuse that. So that's one part of the VStack. And then we have our body of the description, right? The 2 paragraphs or 1 paragraph, whatever. That's another part of the VStack. And then we have the button at the bottom. That's the final piece of the puzzle. If you see in the upper right, we have the X dismiss button. More on that later, but that is also going to be part of the VStack. So I like to take this step by step. I mean, I just kind of broke it down for you. So we'll leave the X towards the end because there's more explanation there for why we're doing that. But let's start with our framework title view, right? The reusable VStack we created. So here in our body, let's get rid of the text here, give us our kind of overall VStack, and let's create our framework title view. And here's where it gets tricky, right? So it takes in a framework. Well, okay, we haven't passed in the framework yet. We're gonna pass data in the next video. But I can set that up, right? So I can do var framework that we're going to get, and it is a framework. Now, when you create a variable on your view overall, but you don't give it a value, and you want your preview to work, you're gonna have to give your preview a value. Like it's gotta know what to show, right? So you can see missing argument for parameter framework and call. Hit that, fix it. Cool, so now it's expecting a framework. Well, if I initialize a framework, you see it takes a name, image, cool. So I can initialize one right here. We'll go to our framework real quick. I'm just gonna give you an example here. So I could copy, paste this, go to our framework detail view. Let's move that up. If I wanted to just kind of paste that framework initialization right here, like this will work. If I hit my preview, well, editor and source, got to pass in framework up there so it knows what to do. Now try again on my preview. There we go, app clip. So this works, but man, this is sloppy. Even if I made my canvas small, I don't want all that in here. And oftentimes when building a preview, you'll find out that you have to pass in a lot of your objects. And then if you're passing in objects, you have to initialize a new one. And some of those initializers can be long, as you can see here. So that's super sloppy. So this is why I like building nice mock data. So if we go to our framework model here, just like we had our array of frameworks, we can do something very similar. Static let sample framework, right? So just one. And that is going to equal, and we'll just, you can pick whatever one you want. We'll use ARKit, right? Who doesn't like some good old AR? So copy ARKit, and now our sample framework equals ARKit. So, our messiness, right, if you will, or kind of the necessary evil of having all this stuff is in our mock data file, right? Kind of separate away from our nice, neat code that we want people to use and read. So now instead of initializing this here, right, I can just do, what framework do I want to pass in? I want to pass in mock data.sample framework. Is that what I called it? Yeah. How quickly you forget. So if I do Command B now, try again on my simulator or preview. Come on, preview, work with me here. There we go. So now ARKit is showing up, and our preview is nice and clean, right? Mock data.sample framework. So that was a little aside, but as you build more and more complex apps, and you want the preview, and I'm gonna be honest, sometimes my views will get kind of complex that I just give up on the preview. I'm like, you know what, this view's just not gonna have a preview because I don't wanna take the time to build it. Maybe that's bad practice, but I'm just being honest. That's how I kind of worked in my last app. Sometimes I didn't take the time to build the preview because it can get complex. So anyway, that is the initial step of our detail view. Now, what's the next step of the VStack? Like I said, well, it's our body, our description. Well, that's just the text here. So if I do text, and what's the text we want to pass in? We want to pass in framework.description. Right, so bam, there you go, it shows up right away. Now we want to adjust this text a little bit, right? Because as you can see, it's hugged up right up against the edge, right? You want to make this, because these are going to be paragraphs in, I tried not to make them walls of text, right? You don't want to have walls of text in your app. So I tried to break them up a little bit, but I want to make this easy to read. So let's get it away from the edges here. How do you think we're going to do that? We're going to put padding on it. So I do dot padding. There we go. Now it's spaced out nicely, as you can see. That's much more easier on the eye. One thing we want to change as well is the font. Now, remember, like I said, this is not a title. As you can see, title's huge. You don't want it to be like that. We want body. So body is more just for like actual reading, like paragraphs, like we're doing here. So there you go. There's the body. All right, so we got that in place. Now the next piece of the puzzle is the button at the bottom. So we've done this before in our weather app. Button. Again, the first part is the action. The second part is the label, what it actually looks like. And we're going to do the same thing we did in the weather app. So text, and the text is going to be learn more. And again, as you can see, we just get the learn more blue button. That's pretty basic. We want to make it actually look like a button. So let's do font. Again, this is a little bit different. Last time we hard coded a font of 20. This time we're going to support the dynamic type .title2, right? So that's getting a little bigger. Again, I want to make it semi-bold, .font weight, .semi-bold, right? Not too bold, but bold enough. So again, that's one button you could do, but we want to again put the background around it. So background color, we're going to do color.red, but red and blue doesn't look good, right? So we want our foreground color, which is going to be our text color, .foreground color to be .white. There we go. Well, that looks pretty cramped, of course, right? Because we didn't give it a frame. And now here's an example of where the order of the modifiers matter, right? So you may just be like, okay, cool, let me give it a frame. Frame, and then like I mentioned, my typical go-to button is 280 by 50. That's just my personal preference. Change it if you like. Cool. But you may be like, wait a minute, it doesn't look any different. Well, again, that's because we're putting the frame on after we've already established our background color. So the frame's got to come before background color, so the background color actually fills up the frame, right? So there you go. Now you see the change here down in the lower right. And then the final touch that we're missing is .corner radius of 10, right? Just to round off those corners a little bit to get the button looking nice. So that is our button here in the VStack. Now the button is kind of cramped up against the text, right? I want the button to be pushed down to the bottom. So if I want the button to always be pushed down to the bottom, what do I need? I need a spacer. So we'll put a spacer above the button. Spacer, there you go. And as you can see, that pushes the button to the bottom. But again, as you see, we put the spacer in this area here. So it's going to push everything above it as far as it can go up to the top. Well, we don't want that. So let's put a spacer above our ARKit VStack, right? Our framework title view. So we'll put a spacer here to push that down. And now it'll like even things out, right? The spacers, these two spacers will do their job to have an even space at the top and an even space at the bottom and push our content in the middle. And that's kind of the look we're going for. Okay, and as I said before, we're going to refactor on the fly as we go, right? So this button here, again, you're going to most likely use buttons all throughout your app. So let's do Command-C to copy, and over in your Apple Frameworks, Command-N, create a new file, SwiftUI view. We'll call this AF for Apple Frameworks button, so AF button, create. Here we go. Now in our body, because I copied that text earlier, just paste that text. Let's get our preview going. So you can see we have our preview of our button. If you want to like tweak it, maybe adjust the design a little bit, you have this nice isolated preview. We don't want it to be learn more all the time. We want to be able to pass in of our title string. We want to be able to pass that in and then put title into the text. All right, so now our button can say whatever I want. It is, in this case, remember last time, well, hold on, let's update our preview. Remember, like I said, if you have properties on your view, you have to pass them into the preview. So we'll say test title, just to show that it is going to update the preview here. So it went from learn more to test title. Now, last time we actually kind of made colors and foreground color a property to make it like super flexible. Well, let's say we have a certain style in our app. It's always going to be red. Our font is always going to be white. So that way, all we got to pass in is the title. So let's go back to framework detail view. And instead of having all this code, we can just do AF button and then pass in a title of learn more. And again, our code in our view is nice and clean. I personally like to have spaces in between each like element. To me, that helps me visually like realize what's separate and what's not. That's a personal preference. Another personal preference, dark mode. I just don't like the way this app looks in like light mode. Anyway, I think it looks so much better like that. Now, the last piece of the puzzle here is when we present the screen modally, as you see in the design, it's going to pull up the card, right? You see how it takes up like 98% of the screen. You may have seen this in like your day-to-day apps. Well, when it does this, you can just swipe it down and you don't have to write any code for that. You get that functionality like automatically. Something you should know about when you display something modally, which is quite common in apps, is the Human Interface Guidelines by Apple. Let's go to that real quick here. So, and I'll link to this in the description of the video. So the Human Interface Guidelines on modality, right, presenting a modal. Here's the example they showed, like the mail app, right? You slide that up. Well, if we go here, right? So yes, you get that swipe to delete for free. You may think that's enough. But here in the Human Interface Guidelines, here's why you should always include a button, right? Well, because they say, always include a button that dismisses the modal view. I'll make this bigger so I can be sure you can read it on the screen, right? For example, you might use a done or a cancel. We're going to use a little X. Including a button ensures that the modal view is accessible to assistive technologies and provides an alternative to dismissal gestures. So Human Interface Guidelines basically says, always add a button to your modals. Don't rely on just the swipe. So we're going to be good citizens, iOS citizens here, and we're going to adhere to that. So we want to put our X in the upper right-hand corner. Okay, so let's start doing that. So we'll put it at the very top. We'll do a button, very, very similar to what we did with the AF button down below. Label. And what do we want our label to be? What do we want it to look like? Well, SF Symbols has a generic X, right? We're going to use that. So that's going to be an image of system name, right? Not just name, because we're using SF Symbols, called X mark, right? So there you see, there's our blue X, pretty small. It's in the middle. Doesn't look like how we want it. So let's start changing that. Let's give it a foreground color. Foreground color. Now, you could do .white. You may think that. But .white is going to be .white on the black background and .white on the white background. So you got to support light and dark mode, so you can't just do white, right? So you can get access to UIKit's system colors, right, that adopt to light mode, dark mode. So you do color, and you initialize the color with .label, right? And this whole dot thing, right? This is where you get all the, again, system colors from UIKit, right? Right? But you can get like, system fill, secondary system, placeholder text, right? So label is one of those that will be essentially black in light mode and white in dark mode is what that label does. So that X is quite small. Let's make it a little bigger. You can do image, scale, and you can see .medium, small, medium, large. We're going to do .large. And this is something you can do with your SF Symbols. I tend to do that a lot. And then we'll give it a frame of 44 by 44 because that's a typical touch target, right? You don't want your touch targets to be so small that they're hard to press, right? And you'll see when I run this, you'll see the touch target I get, like you can see it clicking, you can see it like fading out. Well, you can see I can click over here and still get it. And if I'm clicking here, I'm not getting it, right? So we made our touch target pretty big, right? So you can miss the X and still hit it. Now, the final piece here is, okay, it's dead center. Maybe we're doing a new design style, I don't know, but we probably want it over off to the right. That's pretty typical where dismiss buttons are. So how do I move my X button over to the right? Well, VStack has an alignment. I can do the alignment parameter on the VStack here, and I can do .trailing. Okay, well that moves everything to the right. So I'm kind of showing you what the VStack alignment can do. That's not what we want. And just so you know, you could do .leading. Cool. Okay, that's not it. So okay, we're gonna leave the alignment as is on that VStack. However, what I could do is I can put our X button, which is right here, we're going to refactor this out in a second, into an H stack. So H stack. And let's put our button here into that H stack. So Command X, Command V. So now our button is in the H stack, but you'll notice nothing changed. Well, what can we do to push it to the right in an H stack? A spacer, right? So if we put a spacer in front of that button, now it's going to push that X all the way over to the right. Too much to the right. In fact, let's add some padding onto our overall H stack to give it more space, more room to breathe, not so much right up to the edge. So here we have this H stack, which again goes across the top, pushes the X to the right, and we keep all of our content pushed towards the bottom where we want it, right? We want it to be at the bottom of the card above the button. That wraps up the UI for our detail view. We're going to come back and refactor that X dismiss button later because we still got more to do with that. And in the next video, we're going to pass data and connect these screens.